So the public transport is, it's a little bit of a grey area for me myself, so I'm not that switched on to it. My area is the electric vehicle side of it. And people who've heard me present before will remember my infamous Zap Map. I've deliberately not put that on this presentation tonight because I'm aware that it's not been a great time for a lot of people as far as visitor attractions is. So it may not be, it hasn't changed. I can assure you of that. There are no more charging. There are a few out there but the impact is very little to where we probably would have been if we'd have had a normal year trading with the visitors. So the question that I'm asking with the electric car is and I want you to be, I don't want people to think they should know it, and if they don't ask, there's no question silly. So it's how much do we know? I'm going to try and go through the very basics of what electric cars do and what they are. When can we benefit? And that's not just for the person who's driving the car, that's for the businesses. And is there a grant available? So that is basically what I'm going to go through this evening. And please, if you've got any questions at all, ask at the time, and it should make more sense. So let's see if, there we go. So we've probably all heard about the different types of vehicles. There's BEVs, FEVs, HEVs, and FEVs, which the BEV is a full electric vehicle, so there is no petrol or diesel assistance with that. So that is where we aim to be when all the petrol and diesel cars have died and gone to heaven. We aim to be on a full battery. A FEV is a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, so it's powered by both. It has a petrol or a diesel engine, depending on the manufacturer, and it also has an electric backup, but you can plug in and charge that battery up. You do get self-generation, but it's not as strong as some. Now, the question that the statement I get more often than not is, well, it only does 35 miles when you plug it in. Yeah, that's right, but it assists for 35 miles. It doesn't drive the car, or you can set it up to drive the car if you want. There's options on it where you can drive the car from 0 to 3rd gear, and then the engine kicks in, takes away the battery. So you're probably only using half a mile a day, depending on where you live. But it's city driving, so you can actually get to 3rd gear without actually putting any petrol to use. You can also set it up to be full electric, so if you don't live more than 35 miles away, you can travel to work and back, and you've not used any petrol again. Or you can do it where it just assists when it feels like it needs it. When it feels it's under pressure, it will kick in and just help out to keep the economy down. The MPG can be really, really quite good with them. Some of them go into the 90s to the gallon, which is even more with some. It depends on how you drive, obviously. What I find with a lot of the younger people who drive FEVs is they normally set it up to drive at traffic lights because they go like a bullet when you're an electric, and it's the best way of getting away from traffic lights you've ever had. That's including your Ferraris and everything. It's on par with some of them. Up to 30, they then leave you after that. So then we've got the HEV, and that's the hybrid vehicle, which it's powered by both, but it's self-generating. Now, how it self-generates, my simple, and this isn't 100% accurate, but my simple way of explaining it is, if you remember how we used to have dynamos on a push bike, it's similar to that. And if you remember when you took your foot off the brakes, off the pedals, and the dynamo was on, the dynamo would slow you down on the push bike. It's exactly the same in a hybrid car. If you're self-generating, it will slow the car down when you're freewheeling. So you can actually get to driving and hardly use your brakes if you get used to it, which is the same in the full electric vehicle as well. Yeah. So then we've got the fuel cell electric vehicle, the hydrogen powered vehicle. I would say that they will probably be the most popular, but it'll be long after my lifetime's over, because at the moment, if you've got a hydrogen vehicle, you could fill it up in Sheffield or Oxford. They're the only two filling stations that you can actually get at the moment. But it is probably one of the best replacements for the petrol and diesel. It is happening in Chesterfield. There is going to be a hydrogen powered power generator in Chesterfield, which is going to go along with the I call it Birch Hall, the Chesterfield escape. I can't remember what it's called. Do you remember what it's called, Roger? You did a presentation on, which is the old Birch Hall. It's going to be an outdoor centre. That is going to be putting buses on that will take you out to Derbyshire, and the taxis, I believe, will be run on the hydrogen cell. Okay. Right. The vehicles that we need to take action on, as we've just explained, are the BEVs and the FEVs. So that's the full electric and the plug-in hybrid. And the reason is we need to charge them. If we'll start on the FEV, you can drive the FEV without charging it, but your MPG will be probably worse than it would if you were driving it as a normal diesel. And it's not going to do we've been advised that the generating system on it is, if it's really low, can cause impact to the world as well. So we're not going back 2 paces, but you know we're not going forward 2 full paces either. So the governments are now looking at cars that are using that are claiming the less tax on the company cars as a FEV, and looking at the MPGs. I don't believe it's been said yet that the companies need to keep an MPG list, but it's strongly rumoured that they will be coming in, because the company car tax on a FEV is really low. People are getting them. If they're not charging, the government is saying you don't deserve the tax break on it. So that is strongly rumoured that's going to be happening. There's going to be some sort of system to check that that's happening. And to be honest, I think it's a bit stupid anyway to do it that way. It doesn't take a lot to charge a FEV, so it's just getting a mindset around it. The battery powered vehicle, which is full electric, again, it needs to be charged. If you don't charge that, you don't go. But the other issue which we put down to the Peak District is if we don't have the power to charge them, they don't go home. So if they can't go home, they don't come on holiday and they don't visit us. So we need to be able to cater for the people who are coming from wherever. And if anybody wants to look at Zap Map, you can look on the web. You can see that we've still got a desert in the Peak District where we haven't got any chargers. So we do need to start to look at it. There are quite a few B&Bs and little hotels that have got some form of charging now, which is great. And I'm not here to point a finger. It's just to say, be aware that we need to be able to get these visitors back home again. And I've heard stories of people driving to the M1 to get a charge from the middle of the Peak District just because they couldn't get one anywhere else, which time to charge it up, probably not worth them going on holiday. So they're the 2 main actions that we need to take. The others can survive, but only short term. Well, short term, they've got, what would you say, 20, 25 years before we start to see the diesels and petrols disappear. So again, just people will start to tell you about there's different types of plugs. There are different types of plugs. The only 2 that you need to worry about on the domestic side are the type 1 and type 2. So the type 2 is the one that is now used, which you can see there as the EU Menekes type 2. That is the more popular one. The only 2 vehicles that I'm aware of that use the type 1, which you can see as the Japan one, which again, they all came from there originally, are the Nissan Leaf, the older versions, and the Mitsubishi FEV, which I believe they're still putting them in them. So again, if you were putting a lead in let's say a hotel, put a socket in, don't put one in where it's got the lead, because you might not be compatible with them all. If you look at where the EU is, we've got below it CCS. So if you look at the two, all that's different is the two prongs below. Now, all they're doing is giving the capability of putting more power in. Okay, if you look to the left of that, there's the shadow mow. Now, that is again another high-powered socket because the actual plugs are bigger and they will take more power. So they're the DC charging units. The difference between AC and DC in charging is AC will be restricted by the car, so it will only charge it what the car will let it. But DC will take everything you can put in it, hence the faster charging. Right, what everybody wants to know is the funding. Yeah, there's a grant for £350 per socket. If you're a business, you can have up to 40 sockets and get the grant for that, for each socket. And that is claimed through, now called OZEV, it used to be OLEV, but the Office of Zero Emission Vehicles. So they've gone from Office of Low Emission to Office of Zero Emission. And at the same time of changing it, they took the grant away from the manufacturers. So they played the game of being supportive and then took the incentive away. So if you were looking at applying for a grant for your business, I put the link there. If you can somebody copy that for them to copy off? That it literally asks a couple of questions about your business. If you answer them satisfactory, you will get a voucher. That voucher is then sent to the installer, whoever it may be, for him to claim the grant back. So the grants are always paid to the installer. So his estimate or his quotation will be the grant, will the cost of the job less the grant. He then claims the grant back, and you know, if everything's satisfactory, the voucher number and everything that goes with it is all accepted. The other one, the home charger, it's a lot easier for the person who's having it fitted. The customer, it's a nightmare for the installer. So basically, most installers now will ask for a survey, and they'll send you either an email or a text asking you to take photographs of certain things. You might think, why do they want to know it? But they're asking what size your house is, because we need to look at what power you've got coming in and see what your potential usage is. They'll ask if you've got an electric hob, again, high powered use. If you've got an electric shower, or if you've got any special heating, it gives us an idea that the house is, one, it's accepted and it's big in your power coming in, and your fuse board's big enough to actually drive a car charger. And two, we don't have to we don't have to make a big fuss with the DNO, because they're pulled out with it as well at the moment. It is really, really busy. The car charging world is extremely busy. It is coming. The cars are coming through now, and it is quite manic. So anybody who's involved in it is busy. So picking the phone up on Wednesday night asking for it fitted Thursday, you could be quite, you're pushing it. You look a little bit there with all the installers I know anyway. So it's one to be aware of. If you've got customers coming and they've got electric cars, you can always use what they call the granny lead, which you just stick it into your 13 amp plug, and that takes, they say 12 to 16 hours overnight. But what I would be cautious of, if you use it all the time, it's running at 10 amps plus in a 13 amp plug. So it's having hard work all the time, and there is evidence of the sockets burning out. And if the sockets are burning out, your wiring could be affected as well. So just be cautious with that and keep an eye. Maybe use a different socket. But again, I'm trying to keep it simple as possible without getting too technical, but it's questions that I'm asked a lot, and it's types of chargers. So the ones that you'll have in your home and probably at most people's work are AC chargers. So they're running off the actual power you've got coming in, and it's converting it in the charger and going into the car and then alternating back in the car to charge. So the options you've got with that is, the biggest is 22 kilowatt. That will then charge your car between 3 and 6 hours, but it will also go down to 7.3 kilowatt. So that will then bring it down to 4 to 6 hours. Now, that's what's stated on the internet, but that's empty to full. If you keep your car above 20%, and they advise you never to charge it over 80% unless you're doing an extremely long run or you need it, your car will charge from 20% to 80% in 20 minutes to half an hour. So it's not the 4 hours that everybody is expecting, it's 4 to 6 hours. There will be times when you'll get back and you will sort of say, right, I've used a lot, I need to charge it. But what I would advise is get your mindset into keeping it full. So every night, plug it in. It might take 20 minutes, done, and it switches itself off, but you're leaving the house with a full battery. The days of filling up once a week, I think we need to be looking at changing that mindset. If you're in an electric car, just keep it full and plan your journeys. You know, if you can plan your journey keeping it above 20%, you will. It's a cup of tea. The services or whatever, and they've got the bigger chargers there. But I'm not a great fan of the bigger chargers. It's when they've got to put water around the cable to keep it cool. There's something not quite right there. You know, which is why they're so high. They've got a 2 meter height to get water cool the cables. So then we go on to the DC chargers, which is what I've just mentioned. They go down as far as 22 kilowatt, which is a nice little charge, and but it'll still take an hour. So comparing the price, you could be, let's say your install for a 22 kilowatt AC charger is $2,500. And that, it may be more, it may be less. I'm just using it as an example. To put a 22 kilowatt DC charger in will be about $7.5 to 10 grand. So the cost of install of the DC chargers is massive. And I honestly don't think, if you're using it at home and at most workplaces, you don't need that. It's a cost that you're never going to get by. If I go to do a survey in an office and the people are in the office all day, I would say 7.3 kilowatt, because 4 hours their car's full, even if it's empty. And 9 times out of 10 it's not. But you know, why put a DC charger in? If you've got somebody who's coming in and they might only be in for an hour, then it's about planning. They need to work it, and yeah, 22 kilowatts going to help. But the biggest advantage of having 22 kilowatts is you can add on to it easier. You've got the power there to add on easier. So, you know, your service areas have got the high powered charging, which you may need to use if you're out on the road. But if you're planning, it's the lesser option. You know, the best option you can get is just plug it in every night, you know, and leave the house full every morning. The average of most people driving is 60 miles a day. So, that's the high end of it, is 60 miles a day. So with a car with a 200-mile range, you've got plenty. You know, a lot of people now they've got used to them, are only charging once a week because they're only doing it, you know, the 4 miles a day to work and back. So they don't need to charge every night. But if you're doing a fair bit, let's say we're going from Leeds to Sheffield, I would get into the habit of charging every day. But types of chargers, the reason I've done this is that there's 2 main chargers on the AC side, which most of the hotels and bed and breakfasts and small businesses will only have a single phase, and domestic will only have a single phase supply. So the 7.3 kilowatt is the biggest you can have. Now there's 2 types of that. There's a tethered, which if you look on the right, the white one is a tethered. That means the lead is actually connected in to the charging box. You cannot unplug that from the charger. That lead unhooks from the holster on the wall and goes straight into the car, and it is plug and play. You just plug it in and you go. You know, the pluses of that, and again, this is coming from customers. They're not, if it's raining or even if it's just cold, they're coming home. They're not ferreting through the boot to look for the lead. They're just plugging that in, and the lead stays in the boot all the time. The negatives is they don't always look as neat as that one does, and you know, they're saying it looks like a big hose pipe hanging off the wall. Myself personally, I think I would prefer to just plug that in and then ferreting through my my boot looking for, because if my boot's anything to go by, it'd take me an hour to find it. But it's purely and simply choice. Yeah. So this next photograph, that's another 22 kilowatt, and that will go down to 3.5 kilowatts. That is actually a socket, but it's just got the lead in it, so it looks a bit like Darth Vader, but it is just a Type 2 socket version. Now, the beauty of it going down to 3.5 kilowatt, for a small business that hasn't got a big supply, we could put 4 of them in on a 32 amp supply, and then everybody's getting their little bit of a boost to get them home, instead of me having to apply for a bigger supply coming into the building, which is going to cost thousands. So that easy charger is a Norwegian charger. Their mindset has been, I don't care how much power we've got to make the chargers fit our power ratio. So that's what they've done. So it'll go down to 3.5. It's not a lot, but it is a charge. So that is the reason that they're miles in front of us with it. Right. So the other question, and it's always the barroom expert who says, well, we haven't enough power to run the country. We have just. But if everybody plugged in at the same time, which would be the same if we did it with the cookers, and we had a power failure when there was a big match on, when we put the kettle on, the grid went under pressure. But there are things that are helping the grid. Solar power. If a question I get asked a lot when domestically installing is, I've got solar power. Can I link that into it? People make claims that their chargers will let the solar power take over. The charger won't kick in until it gets to 7 kilowatts, and I don't know of a domestic solar unit that will constantly keep it above 7 kilowatts. So it'll do it, but not very often. So I normally say, look, just take your benefit of your solar as it is, and this is just something else we're putting in there. You wouldn't have to use your cooker on it, so let's just let you've got the bonus of the solar, let's put this charger in on that. So wind generation is massive, and our northeast now is going to be littered with them, but they are a great source of power. The solar power isn't that umphy. It doesn't chuck that much power out for the amount of room it takes. So, but I don't know, you've probably noticed now, if you come in the motorway, you can see fields full of them, and they're quite good. They chuck quite a bit out, but you can see how much space it takes up to do that. The wind generators, again, they don't take that space up, but the class has been a little bit ugly. So it's it swings and roundabouts. Putting them out to sea, I would prefer to see them in some fields as much as being out to sea, because I think it ruins the landscape a little bit and the sea views. But it's everybody's personal choice on that. But it does help. The wind generation is helping the grid enormously at the moment. I do believe, don't quote me on this, but one day last year the grid didn't use anything. It was all wind generation. It was a summer's evening where nothing was being dragged, and the wind generation actually kept the country running. Not for long, but it did it. So we're there. But as I say, that's only what I've heard. Don't quote me on that. The next one, which it's quite behind everything, and that's hydro. There's a couple of ways it can be done. It can be done with the mill, which is at Derbyshire's claim to fame, really. Or what I'm in conversation with a French company, and they put it into pipe work. So the water mains, they put a hydro generator into the mains pipe work, and the flow of the water that Severn Trent or whoever are using is generating power. Now they can be very, very, very fruitful as far as creating and generating power. I would prefer to generate power to charge a big battery, and then we can alternate it back to whatever we need to. But because we'd be putting it into a battery, it doesn't have to be used, and we can actually say, right, let's say a car park, we could have our own battery pack there, generate our own. 24 hours a day it's generating, and probably only 8 hours a day it's actually letting charge go. So I think there's massive benefits to that. Because of everything that's been going off, I've not the conversations I've been having with these French people who've done it in quite a few countries. I think there's some down in the south of England as well, but they are looking more at putting it into pipe work. I think it's just a bit easier. But I'm sure we've got some car park somewhere in Derbyshire where we've got one of the big rivers running through it, and maybe even Master Mills where it's got the network of a power generation. It could even be worked on a line shaft. So that's something that I'm really interested in, sort of generating some sort of interest in. I don't think it would be pathfinders, but I think it would benefit our visitor attractions if we could generate that. Bakewell, for example. Right, so that's everything I've got to say. Any questions come through, Peter?
I'm unmuting. Right, good. Thank you for that, Jim. We've got a few questions. So Judy, I'm starting in reverse order here, so forgive me, everyone. Judy asked the question, can solar panels on a large business unit supply 3 chargers?
The answer is yes, but it depends on how large the panels are and how big the chargers are. It's all about how much they generate. If you've got the generator of, you would need, if you look at it as if you've got a bottle of water and a pint an hour was going out, you need to put a pint an hour back in again. So if you put that into electric, if you're taking 7 kilowatts out, you need to be putting 7 kilowatts in. So if you've got 3, that's 21 kilowatts. And there needs to be quite a few panels just to generate that. But they would do it lesser. Be worth talking to your solar man and seeing if he can increase his battery storage, because it's all about storing the power for when it's prime used. And if the batteries are running at 90% full and then you empty them, it's got that 4 hours times 6 hours to regenerate into that battery again. But yes is the answer, but it all depends on how quickly and what you want to use and what it's actually generating.
Okay, thank you for that, Jim. And the next one, I think we could argue, is a rhetorical question from Frank Bagshaw. Isn't it time that electric cars paid road tax because they are wearing out roads just like others?
I wouldn't know. I'm not in the government, but yeah, I get that. But the incentive at the moment to get people electrified is to not pay road tax. You can actually park free in Sheffield as well. Should we argue that one out as well? It's a government decision. It's an incentive to get people driving electric cars.
Next from Sarah, is there a Peak District policy to increase availability of chargers in towns and villages, including supermarkets, etc.? If so, what is it and within what time scale?
I'm not aware of any policy, but I can probably ask the question. I don't know if anybody's on from any who could answer it. But I'm not aware of any policy. But when you're talking at Tesco's, that's a Tesco decision. Aldi, it's an Aldi decision. It's not a council decision. So the only places that you're looking for the council to be really involved in municipal car parks that aren't privately owned. Street charging could be one of them, but again, it's without. I don't know of any policy that's doing it. The governments have got a policy, so I'd assume that they've got to follow something.
Jim, shall I just you bring up the Zap Map? You've mentioned it a couple of times, and it will tie in well with Sarah's question. So can you stop sharing your screen, please? And I'll just for our viewers, I will just show them what this famous Zap Map is. Okay, so share. Okay, so ladies and gents, this is the Zap Map. And we can see in the Jim, why don't you talk us through it?
Right, so the little Zs, the balloons with the Zs are chargers. The different types of chargers. Some will be DC chargers, fast chargers. Some will be AC rapid, and some will be a type of plug. So if you were driving, you would know where to go to. You can actually plan your route on this map. But what this is showing, as we said earlier, the desert that is the Peak District, you know, it's surrounding it. You know, it's like the ants are coming in to attack. You know, I know that if you go to the right of the Peak District as well, where we get to where the population isn't the same, that drops off. But if you look, the main key areas of Derbyshire and the Peak District, we're not catering for our visitors.
Okay. Thanks. So do carry on, Pete.
Jim, back to that previous point about local authority policy. I'm aware that Derbyshire Dales was involved in a decision to put a charging point in Wirksworth Town car park, the old Market Square car park. Is that part of a wider policy that you're aware of, or was it a fairly random decision?
Finding out what policies are, they definitely don't give installers that information, because, you know, they might class it as being, we could try and manipulate that. The government have said that we need to be catering for it, but I don't think they've tied anybody down. They've put X amount of money in the pot to do it. But again, I think, and I don't want to be, you know, having a go at any of the councillors, but they've all gone for these super fast chargers. And you know, and for Sheffield, for example, they spent just over £500,000 on 5 chargers or 6 chargers, and they could have filled 4 car parks, you know, putting them in cleverly and smartly with 22 kilowatt. A lot of them car parks they used all day. If you put a big 125 kilowatt charger into an NCP car park and somebody's stopping in the office all day, that charge is wasted for 6 hours of that day. It's not charging because it's locked into the car, and it's not doing, the car's took all it can. You know, so to box clever and look at putting, you know, even AC 22 kilowatts in, you can actually make them more effective and more cost effective and more efficient.
Okay, I'm aware that the government has a real ambition to drive electric charge points and also hydrogen filling stations, and I believe there's some significant work going on in Derbyshire around that at the present moment. What's a realistic timescale for rolling this out? And are you aware of any government subsidies coming up in the near future to support such a rollout, either of electric charging points or hydrogen?
I'm not aware of any subsidies as far, well, the only one I'm aware of is the grant for the plugs for the electric chargers. As far as the hydrogen cars filling, I'm only aware of Toyota who took it on as a policy. So I don't know what manufacturers will be jumping on that. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the long-term plan is going to be hydrogen, because it's the better policy. Yeah. But the problem is a hydrogen generator, I think is looking at about something like 40 grand to build. So, you know, to build one in somebody's house doesn't work. And everybody went for, you know, we charge at home, which is great. But I think, yes, we will. And it's in Chesterfield, I believe, this hydrogen plant that's going up to cater for, I can't remember what it's called, Robin, that place at Unston, the Derbyshire
Peak Resort.
Peak Resort, yeah. That, and I think it's all in line with catering for that. But I think they've got some Toyota buses coming and some Toyota taxis coming, which are going to be running customers freely out to the Peak District, which again is massive. I think that's a great idea. Whether that generating that hydrogen plant will be open to the public, I don't know. But again, I don't know of a car that's for sale. I think you have to convert. Yeah. So, but I don't. Again, I'm not sure of that. But it will come.
The research I've been looking at shows there's been city councils that have been converting their fleet vehicles to hydrogens. I think Aberdeen, Liverpool, I think Aberdeen's refuse collection vehicles are now all hydrogen powered. Are you aware of any plans in our area for local authorities to shift their vehicles into hydrogen power?
Not hydrogen. I know Sheffield City Council, their bin lorries are now electric.
Right.
And I know Dronfield Town Council have just received their first electric van. But Dundee, I think it's Dundee, not Dunfermline. They've been running their buses on hydrogen for the last 5 or 6 years, very, very well. So, you know, but if the only issue is with hydrogen is, you need, I suppose, for like a bus company or for a council that's got a depot full of vehicles, it becomes beneficial to put your own hydrogen power station in.
Yeah.
But for the public, it just doesn't seem to be there at the moment. But I think once because again, it's same as the electric cars. Everything's still very new and charges every day is a school day. You know, we're picking up new, and they've probably learned. They've learned from the first hydrogen generators where they went wrong in cost. So that's going to be coming down in price, and I can see it replacing the garages. You know, instead of diesel and petrol, it's going to be hydrogen.
Now, John Ward is taking this one step further, and whether there's a hint of Brexit around this is next question. There's a bit of devilment in him, I think. How is the UK doing with charge points compared with the EU? So we were talking about other cities, Aberdeen, Dundee, etc. Are you aware of what's happening in Europe?
Not as a general, but compared to Ireland, we're miles in front. Compared to Norway, we're miles behind. Compared to Italy, there's nothing in it. Germany, parts of it are miles in front, but they're sort of neglecting the sticks, should we say. They're not sort of supporting the people out in the country as much. The French have got some great kit. It's just it's been quite restrictive for them, I believe. You know, I was using some French stuff for a while, and I've stopped using it because it was hurting me as a company. But as far, I don't think you could call it. You know, it's up and down every day. I would say we're well behind as a country compared worldwide, because I think a lot of it is lip service. We're not, you know, we're not taking it seriously. We're just giving it lip service.
Now, there are 2 points stem from that. One, I'm aware of, I've got a colleague that works with Espoo, ESPOO in Finland, a city in Finland, an industrial city in Finland with ambitions to be carbon neutral / carbon positive. I'm aware of some good work going on there, more general, not just transport. So I've included a link in the chat to that. But then John goes on to the next point, which fits absolutely perfectly with what you've just been saying, Jim. We've got COP26 coming around the corner in November. This government needs to be staking a green claim. It's showing its green credentials. And what will it be revealing at COP26? What can we claim to be world leading at? And whilst you're saying that, I'm going to put another link in the chat.
Again, I'm not a politician, so I don't know how they're going to confront that or what they're going to say, but I'm sure they'll have an answer. And I would say if it's coming at the end of the year, they might have something more structured to say. But I think it's probably going to be their promises to be by 2040. Diesel and petrol free, you know, and it's quite a big paintbrush, but it's a get out of jail brush for them. You know, there is also there's a village, I can't remember what it is now, and it actually is totally zero emissions, and it's run from the waste of a steel plant. Everything in the city is run from them, so the waste is generating all their power and coming out as a zero. I mean, Sheffield, for example, they're still, a lot of Sheffield is run from their plant, their waste plant, you know, which I didn't realize how big that was until probably 2 or 3 years ago when I sat down with them talking about, you know, it's a monstrous thing. It's going under tunnels under the city, you know, and there's a lot of Sheffield's power generated from that, you know, which, you know, should really put us in front, but it's never mentioned.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Now I've put in the chat a link to the Sustainable Markets Initiative, which is driven by Prince Charles. It's a private sector focused initiative worth looking at, colleagues. I'm going to ask one more question from an anonymous attendee, and then I'm going to hand over to Robin, who's got a couple of questions. So anonymous questioner, I have a Type 1 EV home charging point for a Mitsubishi PHEV, don't know what that is. Can I put other leads into it or other types of PHEVs?
Is it a socket or is it a tethered? If he's got a socket where his lead, one end is Type 1, which goes into the car, and the other is Type 2 that goes into the charger, yes, is the answer. But I'm assuming it is, because you can't get the lead out of the other end if it's tethered, if it's tied to the cable. So yeah, it's a 7.3 kilowatt. It will charge anything, you know, as long as you're not forcing a cable into the charging end. You know, if it fits the charging end, it doesn't matter what's at the other end.
Brilliant. Okay, I'm going to stop now. Robin, do you want to come in and ask you a question?
Yeah, Jim, does it matter what size the vehicle is? I saw a documentary on TV to say that you mentioned electric dustbin vehicles in Sheffield a moment ago, which surprises me. This documentary said larger vehicles, delivery trucks, articulated lorries, and so forth need the power and therefore need petrol or diesel engines, because possibly to have the power. It might be the range, it might be the power that petrol and diesel provide versus electric. Does the size of the vehicle matter versus what type of power source it has?
Yeah, well, it doesn't. It matters, because if it's not a big enough power supply, it'll take longer. But the way they've actually Sheffield, and I've not seen it, but I've spoke to somebody who's worked on it. They've installed what they call charging battery packs. So overnight or during the day, or when the trucks are out, if you picture it like a desk on wheels, that's the battery pack, and you plug that into your three-phase whatever ampage socket. That charges up. You then wheel that to the truck and charge the truck from that. So basically, what it's doing is taking advantage of the engines charging on a DC level. How long they take, I don't know, because I've not worked on one. But I would say it's probably going to be an overnight, a 4 to 6 hours charge. But yeah, the bigger the battery, the longer it is going to take to charge. Okay, but that is changing as well. That's getting better and better as well. And
how long do batteries typically last? Should I add? Is there an issue with cold weather, the depths of winter?
The depths of winter means that you'll use more power because you've got more stuff on it, and the temperature affects the output on the battery. But as far as lifespan, Tesla have guaranteed theirs for 10 years. And I think the rest are following on. They're gaining in confidence all the time. They've had to put a guarantee on it so as people would buy them. Because without a guarantee, nobody was going to convert. So I know Tesla, it's 10 years. I believe that Volkswagen are doing something similar. Volkswagen are the secret agents here coming in very, 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 and they've got some beautiful cars coming in. But there are also some great cars coming in from China, which are brand new cars, manufacturers, the Lucid. There's an American one called the Rivian, which it's unbelievable. It's a pickup truck that goes 0 to 60 in 2.4 seconds. It's like, wow, 500-mile range on it. And the whole design of cars is changing because they've not got this big tank in it. The battery is the flow.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of car subsidies,
I believe
Could
that's
you-
stopped.
Has it? Right.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
If
Well,
it's
that
not
was
stopped,
good.
it's stopping.
That's a short answer then.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you know, to compensate the £6,000 they were putting into the buying of a car, they've said they'll extend the £350 for the socket till the end of next year. So it's like, wow, you know, to me, I was really annoyed because it's not incentivizing anybody to buy, you know, and we need an incentive, you know.
Okay. And what this is all about carbon emissions, right? We're trying to reduce carbon emissions. What is from the manufacture of a car to its use to its dismemberment, or however a car, as you say, goes to the car heaven? how many tons of carbon would a typical electric car emit, if that's the right word, versus a petrol car? Could you give us a clue?
Just let me get my calculator out. No, the computer says no. I haven't got a clue. You know, I wouldn't even know how to start. I could look it up on the internet, but I don't think it's going to be. I don't know how you'd work it out. The electric cars aren't old enough to work out what length of time they're going to be with us. You know, they're a lot better because we haven't got the scrappage of the engine. You've just got either 2 motors or 4 motors. You know, so I don't know is the answer to that.
And I note a question earlier from Rhiannon, who says, sorry, Peter, if I'm jumping, stealing your thunder.
Carry on.
So Rhiannon did ask during your presentation, does someone who only drives 4 miles a day actually need a car? They could cycle, that's more sustainable. My concern with electric cars is most still aren't any more circular than existing cars, so not as green as they might seem. Do you have a comment on that? Are they as green as they seem?
Well, it depends on how you see it. You know, they're a hell of a lot greener than the combustion engine, and you know, it's not even an argument that. But yeah, you could walk 4 miles to work, but it all depends on if you get to work whether you have to go anywhere else. You know, but that's not an argument. You know, you could argue every option you want with that. But yeah, I think if I work 4 miles away from it, even I'd walk to work. You know, because it's. But I've just thought of something else then, but I'll not say that. As far as green, you know, a lot of people are saying, yeah, they're just talking about the emissions of the combustion engine, but you know what we're forgetting is the tankers that bring that oil to England, the refineries that burn into the skies, and the tankers that bring them to the forecourts. That's all part of the emissions as well. Whereas, you know, we've got a power station that it stops at that then, you know, as far as anything going out there. So you could argue either way. You know, I've stopped arguing which is the greener a long time ago, because I've found that I never win the argument, you know, because if somebody don't want to believe it, they won't believe it.
Okay, I've got an interesting question from Nicola Bunting here, and it might be worth, Robin, could you bring Nicola in?
I can. And Nicola, I did email you a couple of weeks ago. That's by the by. So let me bring Nicola in, allow to talk. So Nicola, the floor is yours.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me? My internet's not very good, as well as everything else, but hi. Yeah, my question is about, I'd love to put some electric points in for car charging, but as a Tesla owner myself, we do frown upon being charged if somebody tries to charge us. But from the other point of view for myself, if I have 150 guests and even if only 10 of them come with an electric car and spend all week charging it, you know, is it expected to be free all the time?
No is the answer to that. Strangely enough, the paint's still wet, but there is a very reasonable charger coming out with contactless. I'm just in the process of talking to them. It's unbelievable. It will solve so many problems for everybody. The only issue you will have, and you would always have that with a hotel, is that that you can only get the grant for the charger if it's for staff. So it has to be in a parking area that is either locked away, which I would doubt, or it says staff parking only.
Yeah,
I have heard of people who've got
guests,
stickers in the back of the van saying staff only, but I wouldn't want to.
Right. Okay. I was just intrigued to know what the staff on charging is.
You can charge, and you could probably get, if you could work it right, you could probably get a grant and still use the contactless charger. And the tariff, you can charge what you want on it. If you're paying 15p, you can charge £1 if you want. It's
right.
No problem. Or even if you don't do contactless, what other hotels are doing, charging £10 a night to charge.
Right. Yeah.
Then
like a flat fee.
Yeah. Then the grant is acceptable because it's staff parking, and then it's just part of the tariff. The government aren't going to see what it's for.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The
Do carry on, Pete.
Final question from me. I've put into the chat a link through to the D2N2, so Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire electric vehicle charging network, and they reference a D2N2 card. What's all that about, Jim?
Not sure, because it's mainly Nottingham where that's taking place. Derbyshire's still a little bit behind, but what normally happens is you can have one of the big companies has got their charging system, and they're all on different platforms. I'm assuming that this is hitting one of the platforms where what they do is they invoice you after taking their cut. Yeah. So one thing that I didn't mention earlier, that the easy charging station has got a free back office, which makes it really popular with companies. From that, you can generate an invoice. So that's got its own little platform, if you get my meaning. ChargePoint have got their own platform, and what the industry is trying to do is saying, we want you to lose that so as we can have one that, and they won't do that because obviously I think they're making quite a few bob on it. So until that happens, there's going to be different platforms out there, and what it's called the OCCP platform, which they all get on and it all merges together. Similar to transport with trains, buses, they're all trying to get the one, like the Metro card is virtually redundant now because it's contactless. But what they're trying to do is if you book a journey from Sheffield to Glasgow and you go to the other side of Glasgow, one ticket pays for your train, your bus, and your taxi. Yeah, which that's the perfect world. There's a lot of heads to get agreeing on that.
Okay, that's it from me, Robin.
Thank you, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Jim. And it is now 6 o'clock. Does anybody have any final questions? Looking at the questions, the Q&A, I don't think we have. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which I can't remember which it is off the top of my head. Do please check the Business Peak District website. I hope you're all well, and hope you're all getting back to life as normal. So, and I hope to see you in person very soon at hopefully an event. Thank you, Bob. And we shall call that a day.